Welcome to another Ocean Ideas Talk, brought to you by ocean lovers.
So I think we're a bit biased, but we absolutely adore sea dragons and seahorses and pipefish, and also ghost pipefish, which has just been sighted in Kurnell recently as well. So get down there and have a look. There's one floating around. But yeah, these animals are really, really incredible and really amazing. So as we've heard already, they belong to a family of fish called Cygnathids or Cygnathidae. They're some of the most unique and charismatic fish that we have in the oceans, and many of them are actually found in Australia, and a number of them found here in Sydney. So Dave, I want to ask you what makes them so unique and what really draws you towards them?
Thanks, Mitchell. Hello, everybody. So we've been, studying these little critters for about a quarter of a century now. And as Mitchell said, the group you could say, the common feature you would see is the long snout. That's what synnathid means, fused jaw. And they catch their prey like a little suctorial snout. So they catch little tiny prawny things, crustaceans, mysids and that sort of thing. We're really lucky in Sydney because we have not only the sea dragons and seahorses we'll talk more about, but other creatures like pipe horses and dwarf pipefish and the like. In fact, just about a year or so ago, a new pipefish was discovered in Kurnell, which is one of the hotspots, as some of you know, who dive a lot. And it was discovered by someone looking through his sea dragon pictures and seeing one in the background, this red pipefish, which they eventually found was a new species known to humans. Really we're very lucky in Southern Australia, as I'll expand upon. They're amazing, they're very iconic, and in fact we're really peddling this Great Southern Reef concept at the moment. Comparing it to the Great Barrier Reef, it's just a huge area of Southern Australia, and sea dragons, seahorses, etc. are the real flagships of this. So it's not hard to explain. You can see a photo over there of a sea dragon, but yeah, just beautiful creatures. It doesn't hurt that the males guard the eggs. That gets them in the thumbs up for many people too. And they're apparently the most popular things in world aquaria, not sharks. There you go.
Amazing. And Jill, what drew you to work with seahorses?
Well, for me, it was really an opportunity. I was studying my Masters of Marine Science at UTS, and Dave Booth sent out an email asking if anyone wanted to participate in an internship program looking at the white seahorse breeding. I put my name in the draw. Originally, I didn't really know much about seahorses. They have such a unique form of reproduction, but that was kind of it. And I guess as my internship progressed, I became incredibly fascinated with these seahorses. They're so unique and quirky and charismatic. And I feel like as I learnt more about them, I had more questions, and that's what really drew me into seahorses.
Fantastic. And Pete, you've been diving for over 40 years, which is really, really amazing. And you're an incredible photographer. And I said before, they're so amazing to see underwater, and they make really incredible models for some of your photography. How special is it to dive with them out in the wild?
Yeah, well, it's a profoundly sort of beautiful experience. I think they're just wonderful animals. There's, they really capture your attention. So even after diving for many years, I just find myself drawn towards them, and you can't help but take, another photo of possibly something you've taken many photos of before, it would seem, but nonetheless, that drive is still there. And look, I remember the first time when you've seen them on TV and images of them, and you're there and you're actually looking at one, a sea dragon or a seahorse, and it's one of those times when you almost have to pinch yourself because it really shouldn't be real. I mean, it looks like a dragon. It's a fish, a very funny looking fish, and there it is in front of you. And, that kind of sense is still with you even today when I see them.
Yeah, absolutely agree. They're wonderful to swim with. I particularly love sitting in front of them and you see them watching you because their eyes move independently and you can see them. They're very slow moving. They typically stay stationary, which is why they make such good models. But when you're sitting in front of them and seeing their eyes, just watching you, it's a really, really incredible experience and absolutely amazing. So we know there are weedy sea dragons around Sydney. Where do you find them? What sort of dive sites? What are the best sites around Sydney, and what sort of environment do you find them in?
Thanks, Mitch. So around Sydney, Kurnell's the best location to find them. You do need to be a diver, unless you're a very good free diver, because they're usually between 10 and 30 metres underwater, so too deep to see them from the surface, basically. Other than Kurnell, it's pretty patchy where you're going to find them. They're called the common weedy sea dragon, but they're really not common at all. That name should change, David, really. I know it's not a scientific name, but so look, anywhere along the coastline, so the opening to Botany Bay, the opening to Sydney Harbour, and along the coast around the headlands, where there's rocky reef and kelp of, where it's at least 10 metres. And they're in small pockets, so it's not continuous. There's like little sections where they may be. And other than Kurnell, it's really hit and miss whether you find them at all. And North Bondi used to be a stronghold. I don't know if there's any there now. I saw some data someone saw, I think the last reported sighting was 2023. So, yeah, there's areas that need to be explored again. Yeah, definitely.
Those of you who travel south at Eden in Twofold Bay at the back of there, we found that's a long time ago now in about 2 metres of water. So they're snorkelable there for some reason. That's interesting.
Amazing. And I guess white seahorses are relatively similar as well. They're found in these really small populations that are kind of separated from each other. And for both of these species, that small population density and their limited swimming ability makes them really vulnerable to some of the issues that we're seeing. So unfortunately, we've seen significant population declines in the white seahorse, and this has led to them being listed as endangered. So Jill, do you want to elaborate on why these white seahorses are facing these threats?
Yeah, sure. So white seahorses, relatively low population densities. So, only 1% of white seahorse fry will make it to adulthood. They're also not great swimmers, and as such, they have this amazing little tail. It's a prehensile tail, and it's really important for seahorses to find habitat. And unfortunately, we've experienced really large declines in their populations due to a loss of natural habitat. So seahorses rely really heavily on natural habitats like Posidonia australis, which is a seagrass, cauliflower corals, also known as Dendronepthia australis. And unfortunately, due to human impacts such as coastal development, extreme weather events, destructive boating, we're really losing these essential habitats, natural habitats, and as such, they're also endangered. And in Port Stephens, we've seen a 95% decline of white seahorse numbers, and in Sydney, between Sydney and Port Stephens, we've seen about a 50 to 70% decline of our beautiful white seahorses. And so, yeah, that's kind of why they're in decline, the numbers, because of their loss of natural habitats.
And our project, the Sydney Seahorse Project, is really focused on the conservation of these white seahorses. And there's a few methods that we're undertaking to try and resolve these issues, as well as boost the wild seahorse population. So can you tell us what we're working on?
Okay. I sure can. So at the Sydney Seahorse Project, we have kind of 3 major conservation efforts. So our first conservation effort is a captive breeding and release program. So at the Sydney Institute of Marine Science, where we're based, we have Chowder Bay right next to us. And Chowder Bay has a beautiful population of white seahorses. So as part of our project, we collect pregnant male seahorses and their partners from Chowder Bay, and then we wheel them across the beach to the aquarium where Sims is. We allow for them to give birth, and then once they've given birth, we actually return the parents back to Chowder Bay, and we look after their little babies for about 4 months or so, until they become big and strong and ready to be released. And so prior to their release back into different bays around Sydney Harbour and Gamay Botany Bay, we actually will tag them. So this involves a fluorescent elastomer tag that is kind of like a little tattoo for the seahorses. It goes underneath their skin, between the skin and their little bony plates, and it's a fluorescent colour. It could be red or green or blue or pink. And basically, once we release our little captive bred seahorses back into the wild, we monitor them. So we monitor them for about 12 months, seeing how they're going, looking at the population and how it changes. And then our second conservation effort is the implementation or installation of seahorse hotels. So as I've just stated, we're losing a lot of our beautiful natural habitats for the seahorses. So seahorse hotels directly address the decline of these habitats. So they're a structure which is kind of modelled off a crab pot. And basically it's a 1 by 1 metre cube, I guess. And it gets put into Sydney Harbour. And over time, it actually fouls up. So the hotel is made from rebar steel, and it fouls up with lots of encrusting organisms, algae and sponges, and macroalgae. And this is really important for the seahorses because it provides them a place to hang out. It provides them feeding opportunities. So as Dave discussed, seahorses and sea dragons, they love tiny little microcrustaceans like amphipods, copepods, and little shrimp. And the seahorse hotels also provide the seahorses with breeding opportunities, so they can hang out with their mates. And then thirdly, our third conservation effort is habitat restoration. So we're working with a few different projects, so Project Restore and Operation Posidonia, to help kind of restore and replant some seagrasses such as Posidonia australis that are really important to the white seahorse.
I just might point out that really it was about before COVID, 2018 or so, that we started working. Mitchell was at Sea Life Aquarium and also at UTS, and we started a project partnership between UTS Fish Ecology Lab, DPI Fisheries and Sea Life to get this whole thing going, this breeding program. It's since moved to Sims and really stepped up under Mitchell's leadership. A lot more interesting research is being developed, and also we're right next to Chowder Bay, which it turns out is one of the major success stories. And in fact, some of the sea life ones from many years ago, or a couple of years ago anyway, are still alive today and doing well. So it's actually working.
Yeah, that's right. So even some of the ones we released from Sims in July 2023, one of our citizen scientist divers posted a photo of one of these seahorses that we can identify through its tags just this week. So that's going on almost 2 years post-release. So it's really great signs for these local populations of the white seahorse. But unfortunately, the weedy sea dragon is also under a bit of threat, and I guess that this talk has actually ended up being quite timely. Firstly, Dave and the team at the Fish Ecology Lab have published a new paper regarding some wash-ups in 2022, and that's available online now for you all to read. But as well, we're seeing some wash-ups occurring again, starting as recently as just in the last fortnight or so. So do you want to elaborate on what the threats are to sea dragons and what are the potential causes of some of these wash-ups?
Yeah, we've had an event just happen recently regarding the sea dragons, but I will say the wonderful work for white seahorses, we don't want to really get to the stage where we've got to bring sea dragons in to save them. We want to prevent that. But a few things have happened. Back in 2022, you might remember some horrible storms and heat waves, all sorts of things happened to the marine environment. And my partner, Gigi, who's out there somewhere and collaborator in this project, linked in with the social media, and we started getting reports of sea dragons washing ashore between Gosford and Wollongong through email. And I realised there's the diving citizen scientists like Pete, who are amazing, but there's also the beach walker. Maybe not if it gets in the water. We started getting reports and photographs of these poor creatures coming in. So we then looked at the causes, and of course massive waves. We had 14-metre waves off Sydney, a record. Also their food, the little mysid shrimp, disappeared. They're usually collected by Sea Life Aquarium for their animals, and they weren't available for quite a while. So some combination to do with the climate change related storms seemed to cause that. So the paper came out the other day, as Mitchell mentioned, and just by maybe coincidence, we started getting some more reports. So in the last couple of weeks, we've had reports of a dozen or so sea dragons and some pipe horses, which is interesting, washing up here, but also in South Australia, the sea foam story you might have heard of. There being leafy and weedy sea dragons washing up there. So I'm starting a signated stranding database for IUCN, and there's some new data, unfortunately, happening right now.
Yeah, it's very alarming, especially to see this in such high numbers. I think the 2022, we estimated there was 200 or so individuals washed up in that event, which is very alarming, given that these species occur in rather low population densities, as we've said earlier. And as you mentioned, we don't want to be at the point that we have to do these sort of conservation translocations. It's almost a last resort to be at that point where we're having to breed and release animals back into the wild. We want to be able to protect them and manage the species as they are. And one key component to that is actually having this, what we would say, baseline data of what the species are like in the wild now, what are their populations like. And an important part of that is having the research conducted, which we can do as researchers, but citizen scientists actually play a pretty critical role in this for us. It's hard to be out there diving every single day, but there are citizen scientists that do that, or there's lots of citizen scientists out there that are diving quite regularly. So Pete, for you, you're playing a pretty critical role in this research for the weedy sea dragon as a citizen scientist, and utilising the groups or the members of the underwater research group as well to accumulate some of this data, both now as we speak, but some data from the past as well. So how is this data being accumulated, and how is that being used for the developing our understanding of this species?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. So there's a few different ways that, or places that the data can go. Like, I think the advantage of divers is, as Mitch says, there's just hundreds out there, and so many have cameras as well. So there's just such a fantastic benefit if we can engage divers, non-scientists in the scientific work. So there is one way. If you take a photo, there's Sea Dragon Search, so you can upload a photo of a sea dragon that you've taken. And they can identify individual sea dragons by their markings, so they don't actually need to be tagged. And that way they know whether or not it's a new sea dragon in a location, or whether or not it's one they've seen before, and if they've seen it before, how many times and how long, and all this sort of information starts to be held. So that's relatively new. Another thing that we're doing with the underwater research group is we ran a survey, because there's a lot we don't know about sea dragons and where they are and how many there are. So we ran a survey and got sort of divers that have been diving for years to fill it in, and found out a bit about where they saw them in the past. And some of those places, they don't seem to be seeing them anymore. So that's information that we're kind of starting to gather now, all this sort of anecdotal evidence around sightings. The problem with divers, if there is one, is that they do tend to go to the same sites a lot, and they don't go to new sites quite so often. So we keep getting photos of the same weedy sea dragons, which is fantastic, but really there's a whole coastline that's not being explored. And that's something that we're trying to do with David. So we know the kind of habitat where we will find weedy sea dragons. We know where there's anecdotally been sightings in the past. It might just be one person remembers seeing one 10 years ago somewhere or other. So we've got some maps, and we're basically trying to identify likely spots to find weedy sea dragons, and that includes North Bondi. So we need to go to these places and have a look, basically, see if there are any sea dragons there. And there's a lot of coastline potentially to go to. So, you know, it's going to take a lot of diving, and a lot of people probably diving. And they're not always easy to find. I mean, I've been to places where you've seen them and you go back to the same place exactly a day later and you can't see them. Or even where you look at one, then look at your camera, and then look back and it's gone. And they're 40 centimetres long, so they're not tiny, and they're not like seahorses. They're not wrapped around something. They're just hiding in the kelp. So they are difficult to find, but we're trying to identify these target locations where we go back and see whether or not there are sea dragons there. And if there are, maybe get a sense of how many there are, take photos of them, etc. And we know from the wash-ups, for example, a lot washed up at Collaroy and Narrabeen. Through the survey and talking to divers, I don't think I know anyone that's actually seen a live one there. So there are places where they must be that we just haven't found yet. So they're out there. So there's an adventure, a quest to find more. The other thing that we're doing with UTS is they're interested in data without photos. when we don't see sea dragons. So if we go somewhere, we look and we don't find them, or we go back to the same location a week later where we might have seen one, we don't find them again. They want to start gathering that information, because all you ever hear is where you saw them and where a photo was taken. We don't know all the other places. That data's not being kept, so we need to get the whole picture together.
Absolutely, and yeah, thanks for really driving this and having such an amazing involvement in this project, and really trying to facilitate this research so we have a greater understanding. And as you said, identifying where the species isn't present is just as important as where they are present, especially for those maps where you're projecting where they might be. We need to know what habitats they won't associate with, which will help us sort of look towards the future and what we can, how we can assist this species. So it is a little bit of doom and gloom at the moment. We are seeing seahorses declining, we are seeing sea dragons washing up, but I think the power of research, the power of citizen scientists, and the work that the general community can do is really inspiring. And Dave, I wanted to see, how optimistic do you feel about the future for these species?
Well, first of all, it's not just Australia. I mean, the world loves seahorses and the world loves sea dragons. There's a big symposium we're going to in October in Boston concerning world sea dragon aquaculture. So to have so obviously they are a favourite thing to see. And they are patchily declining. And as Pete said, we really don't have the information, and we're now mapping them with the help of Pete and Marco from Viz Divers. I'll be interested to see when they go out next time after this wash up if we see any change in numbers. So there are places they are thriving. Tasmania is not one of them. There's very bad news there, but we think South Australia, they're popping on a little bit. So cautiously optimistic, and we just got to keep monitoring and alerting people how important they are.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of research for establishing what the wild populations are like now, what they're projected to be like into the future, and what we can do to fix some of the issues that they're facing. So we are quite optimistic about the conservation that we're trying to undertake, and how our research can really enable us to develop the conservation methodologies so that we're having the most positive impact we possibly can. But yeah, we're really grateful for the general community as well, and citizen scientists for their involvement in helping us understand these species better, and really driving some of this work. So spreading awareness is something that we can all do collectively, even if you're unable to get into the water, if you're unable to dive down to 10 to 13 meters to see a sea dragon, spreading awareness is just as important. So keep talking about these species, keep talking about what we're up to, and if you do happen to get any photos of sea dragons, send them through to Sea Dragon Search. If you do find weedy sea dragons washed up at all, please contact Dave through his email, which you can grab off us, or we'll post onto socials as well.
I have a question for Jillian. I just wondered if you would mind elaborating a little bit more about the methods of monitoring the seahorses. You mentioned the fluorescent little tags. Is it just a visual thing, or is there some electronic way that you're monitoring them? You just diving?
Yeah, so it's all, the monitoring is all done doing scuba diving surveys. So this little fluorescent tag is visible to the eye, but we also have the use of a UV torch. So we shine the little torch over our seahorses, and that's a way that we can see the tags a little bit better. So depending on kind of the coloration of the seahorse, some of them might be quite dark and might be quite hard to see their colour, their coloured tag, sorry. So once we shine that little torch over, it's quite easy to see. And when we're doing our scuba diving surveys, the things that we're recording are the tag colour, the tag placement, whether the seahorse is male or female, and the location of the seahorse. Yeah.
Something you do every week or a month? Or?
Yeah, so after we release our seahorses, we will monitor them twice a month for the first 3 months, and then we'll monitor them once a month afterwards. And I guess that's also really important for our citizen scientists, so they're helping us monitor when we can't get out to do it too. Yeah.
And just to add to that briefly, so the seahorses are quite small overall, so the maximum total length is 16 centimetres, and a fully grown adult will only weigh about 10 to 12 grams. So we're not quite at the point that we can have satellite tag on them. They're not as big as a shark or a turtle, so we can't quite do that yet. But one day they'll have little microchips that can help us find them, but I don't think that's anytime soon. So for now, our best efforts are to tag them and then go out and try to actually recapture them. And then, yeah, as Jill said, these tags are visible externally, so photographs of the tagged seahorses, we can identify individuals.
I would like to know if you have found that the central urchins or the long spine urchins are degrading the sea dragons or the seahorses' habitat, and have you thought about doing a partnership with Paddy for the future divers generation?
Well, yeah, as you probably, it sounds like you know a bit about it. Obviously, the urchins that have increased to a certain degree in numbers. There's one species coming south with climate change, have managed to eat the little spores of kelp and therefore created what we know as urchin barrens, which incidentally fish love. We find our tropical species we're also studying and other fish do go on them, but you're losing kelp, which has other important ecosystem services. They hold lobster, abalone, etc. So there may be some interaction with the distribution of sea dragons we haven't worked out yet, and I'm not sure about seahorses so much.
There would be a bit of overlap with the seahorses, but in particular seahorses are primarily, well, this species is primarily found on seagrasses and soft corals and some macroalgae, so there's probably less interaction than there would be for the sea dragons. The sea dragons are more closely associated with some of those larger macroalgae or larger kelp species. So it's definitely an issue in terms of overall ecosystem health, but direct issues is they're a little bit separated in their ecology.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Ocean Ideas. Please make sure to share it with your networks and help us in our mission to turn ripples of action into waves of change for our blue planet.